Hi, my name is Nathan, and we are here today at the Neabsco Creek Boardwalk to talk a little bit about transportation and travel in the United States and its development. Through the early years of the country and the colonies, water travel was easily the best way to get around. It was the safest, the fastest, you could carry the most goods. Roads in the colonies were not in very good shape. They were typically dirt, no gravel, nothing to really treat them. And they were typically very narrow, only really wide enough for people or for maybe a horse to pass each other. So you really couldn't carry heavy goods, big trunks, chests. Of course, Virginia's staple crop, its biggest production, its cash maker, is tobacco, which was typically moved in about a 1,000-pound barrel called a hogshead. And to move a hogshead along the road took a lot of effort because there really weren't any wagons that could handle that much weight at the time, talking early 1700s. And horses would take quite a few of them to move them. So typically, hogsheads were rolled. They would create something called a rolling road. Typically, a plantation owner would have their enslaved people go out, smooth out a particular path to a waterfront area, and then roll by pushing, or potentially with a horse, each hogshead by itself all the way down to the nearest landing. Now, when you get on the water, most of the vessels on the Potomac are fairly small. They were what are called brigs if they were square rigged, or sometimes shallops, which were small, very shallow draft sailing boats. And they were all very typical European designs. They weren't really engineered to come up a lot of these smaller creeks like Neabsco, Powell's Creek, Quantico Creek. So it took a little bit of American ingenuity to change that. Over the years, the colonies, both in the Caribbean and in North America, slowly developed towards something called the schooner. Now, the schooner combined a lot of the characteristics that were needed for trade in the colonies. They were typically built with a shallow draft hull, so they could come further up these creeks that larger ships trading across the ocean couldn't. And they were also typically built to be faster, just to be more efficient. They could travel longer distances quicker by the design of their sails. They were rigged what's called fore and aft, and that would allow them to get closer to the wind and move along even very shallow, very weak winds. They were also built very sharply. They had nice pointed bows, and that would also help them cut through the resistance of the water and again, move quicker. Now, the positive side of this for the British government is this lets them speed trade, which is why they've acquired all these colonies. And for the negative side, it also allows the colonists to violate the border protocols and trade regulations much easier by also letting them evade the king's vessels very easily with a nice, quick vessel that could go into harbors and ports and ocean fronts that the British Royal Navy could not follow them. So, positive and negative. Today, however, schooners are easily some of the most popular pleasure sailing craft and, in general, sailing craft that are most prolific in the Americas and in Europe as well. Because that design, that development has only improved with time, and people still are looking for fast, quick sailing vessels, mostly for sport, not typically for trade. But here on Neabsco Creek, we know the last vessels to trade commercially here, bring goods in and out, were schooners as well. They were built up at Occoquan or in Alexandria. And they lasted until the early 1930s, before the bridge behind me was damaged by a fire and the draw mechanism was permanently locked shut, thus ending the commercial boat trade here on Neabsco Creek at the same time that the local highway system had improved, roads had been paved, and there was no longer the need for sailing vessels.